Hello everyone, you've tuned into Business Today TV and I'm Aakanksha. Today we are joined by a very special guest. He's Jarek Jacubcek. He is the head of law enforcement at Binance, which is the world's largest crypto exchange, and he was also a former analyst at Europol. He's an expert when it comes to financial frauds, and today he's going to give us some deep insights about how the financial frauds can be stopped and how Binance has been working towards it. Thank you for joining us today, Jarek.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me in.
All right. So let's just dive into the questions. My first question is about the latest notification by India's Finance Ministry. They bought crypto transactions under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So what do you think? Is this move a positive one for the industry, or is it going to slow down the growth of the industry? And how is it going to impact cyber frauds and financial transactions like that? So let us know, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is a good question. Of course, generally speaking, at Binance, we do welcome opportunities to actively engage with regulators, and we definitely do support clear rules of the game, clear regulations, because, of course, we believe that there has to be a set of defined rules by which cryptocurrencies have to behave. So having a clear regulatory framework is a definitely step in the positive directions. And of course, Binance and other large cryptocurrency exchanges will have to carefully study these rules and behave accordingly. When it comes to the actual cooperation with law enforcement and compliance and fighting criminals, I believe there won't be too many surprises in this end, because Binance is already compatible with legislation in many other jurisdictions, and often we go far above of what is necessary. So we can then, of course, discuss the individual compliance bits and pieces if we have time to go into greater details.
All right. So since you just mentioned that Binance has several times, cooperated with law enforcement agencies and governments to curb money laundering, could you tell us about a few instances where they worked with the Indian agencies, say the Enforcement Directorate, to curb cyber fraud in India?
Indeed. As you can imagine, like somebody who has 12 years of experience and moved to Binance last year, it is of really great personal importance for me to support law enforcement investigations around the world. So I have to say that we do support criminal investigations in India and other jurisdictions. So far, we have had a very positive experience supporting Enforcement Directorate investigations, as well as working with other law enforcement agencies. Example of such a practical cooperation would be our support of the e-nuggets investigation, investigation that has generated a lot of media interest over the last few months. And during this investigation, we have provided extensive support to Enforcement Directorate, often under very short deadlines. And as you have noticed in the media, our cooperation led to identification of the suspects and ultimately led to a substantial seizure of funds. So this was one of the great examples of the public-private cooperation.
All right. That sounds extremely insightful when you say that. You've had 12 years of experience working in this realm, and now you're helping governments and agencies via Binance. And you also spoke of different ways how Binance has helped ED, for instance. But my next question is, there's everybody really believes, and there's this widespread notion that cryptocurrencies help and cryptocurrencies aid in laundering money, but I believe you're of the opinion that that's not correct way to approach this, and blockchain actually helps in tracing all these transactions, and it's actually aiding in curbing this menace down. So could you please explain your stance on this to our audience?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, you have laid it out in a very good way. So of course, cryptocurrency is a useful and practical technology. And like any useful and practical technology, it is bound to be also abused by criminal actors. And we have seen this in the past with legitimate technologies. The internet itself, before it was embraced by majority of humanity, was in its inception heavily abused for criminal activities. It was, but of course, because we did not regulate the internet down to every nook and cranny. We have the internet now that is usable and it serves for benefit of humanity. So something similar also will be the case with the blockchain technology. And as you say, there are few aspects from which we can look at the cryptocurrency abuse by criminals. So if we take a look at, let's say, the volume of funds that is flowing through cryptocurrency transactions, volume of criminal funds, we can easily say, there are hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through cryptocurrencies coming from criminal activities, which is true. But at the same time, if we take a look at Binance and if we take a look at the origin of the funds arriving to our platform, we can see that much less than 1%, far less than 1% of the funds are coming from criminal activities. And it is not just us who is saying it. If you ask any reputable blockchain tracing company, such as Chainalysis, Elliptic, TRM, they would confirm that roughly 0.2% of cryptocurrencies originate from cryptocurrency, from criminal sources. So of course, even if we don't know everything that we don't know, the criminal abuse, of course, is much less prominent than, for example, when it comes to cash or informal money transfer channels. So definitely, the transparent nature of the blockchain is something that allows us to actually take a closer look into what is happening within the transactions rather than other payment mechanisms.
All right, fair enough. As someone who has worked in the law enforcement themselves, what do you think are certain steps that can be taken by companies, by governments, and stakeholders everywhere to curb money laundering and to bring down cyber fraud?
Yeah, of course, there are some steps that have to be literally taken by everybody in the industry, because as soon as there exist companies within the industry where the threshold for the users is much lower, when the compliance threshold is much lower, then criminals would, of course, flock. They would migrate to these companies. So Binance is actively pushing for several measures that would improve identification of users, that would improve the fight against misuse of cryptocurrencies. So, for example, when it comes to KYC, Binance has taken an active approach to identify all active users on the platform, and this should be a necessity for the companies in the business, because as long as you don't know who your customers are, then it is very difficult to combat flow of criminal finances. But apart from the KYC and other compliance, for example, checking the flow of incoming and outgoing transactions, checking if the money is not coming from illegitimate sources, we also have to do much more than we have to actively cooperate with law enforcement investigations. So this is what Binance is doing on a daily basis, and this is of course something that we can expand on. But we also have to be very active when it comes not only to investigation. We have to be active. We have to really actively support crime prevention efforts, and this is also one area where we are actively cooperating with law enforcement.
All right. That's very interesting. Where you say there are multiple steps that a company can take, say starting from KYC, knowing your customers, and then cooperating with the with law enforcement agencies if a crime has been committed. I have one more question for you, and this is our last question since we are running out of time. What are your views on CBDCs? And do you think, like governments say that they'll help in curbing down money laundering, they'll help in curbing down cyber fraud? What's your take?
Yeah. Of course, this is a question for the governments to implement. So it would be kind of patronizing from my perspective as a cryptocurrency investigator working for a private company to basically give my views of what governments and central banks will be doing. But ultimately, the question is what the customers will use. Ultimately, it depends whether this will be something that the inhabitants in the country will be comfortable with, and if this is something that if this is something that will be practical for everyday use of people. So at the end of the day, people will use the assets and the payment methods they will find practical for their daily lives.
All right. I'm sorry, I just have one more question. I said the previous one was the last one. What are some tips and some heads up tips and all which you would like to give to people when they're transacting using cryptocurrencies, and if they are transacting on the internet? As someone who's worked in the law enforcement, what are some tips that you'll give, that you would like to give to people, especially in India, so that they don't end up losing their money?
Yeah, indeed. And of course, I'm not pretending that cryptocurrency is immune to criminal activities. Unfortunately, there are many criminal actors who are using the popular narrative of cryptocurrencies, and they are creating scam websites and different Ponzi schemes and different investment schemes that try to attract naive investors. And unfortunately, many of these platforms are fraudulent from the very beginning. These platforms, their only objective is to attract people to invest the funds, and in many cases they actually display the accounts, the balance on the accounts that is growing. They made people invest more and more money, and of course, the people will realize these sites are scams only at the moment when they will not be able to withdraw any funds from the platform. So my advice is do your own research. Take a look at which platforms are most popular. Take a look at whether these platforms actually are used by millions of people, if these platforms were tested through time, if these platforms can guarantee that they have billions in assets, so that you will decrease your counterparty risk, so that you will decrease the risk that you invest at a platform that you should not. And practically every time that somebody you don't know approaches you online and will push you into some investment, ignore the advice, run away from it, because nobody gets up out of their bed in the morning with the intention of helping you appreciate your funds. So treat every advice coming from email or social media or different platforms as something that is very likely a scam.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much, Jarek. And I hope our audience was able to get a few tips which would help them in their journey when they use cryptocurrencies or other means of finances on the internet. Thank you so much for taking out the time. It was lovely speaking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.